If you're watching this, you're probably at the stage that 99% of the awakened never admit to going through. No one warned you that after waking up, silence would come. Not that pretty piece that people post, but a strange, deep, almost uncomfortable silence. You don't feel like talking about spirituality. He doesn't feel like explaining what's going on. And sometimes not even being close to people who have always been part of your life. The world remains the same. But something in you can't come back. And the most confusing thing is this: you are not sad, you are not lost, but you are not as you were before. If this is happening to you, it is not regression. It is a phase of awakening that almost no one explains because it does not make noise. And that's exactly where everything starts to change. You know that feeling that you're doing everything wrong in your spiritual process? You've experienced those magical moments of awakening, the crazy synchronicities, the insights that gave you goosebumps, that absolute certainty that you were connected to something bigger. But suddenly, out of nowhere, all of this disappears. Total silence. You try to meditate, and you don't feel anything. He asks for signs, and the universe is mute. Open those books that once transformed you and are now just lifeless words. And then that panic hits. Did I lose connection? Have I regressed? Did I do something wrong and God abandoned me? The truth is that almost no one prepares you for this, because everyone only talks about the beautiful part of spiritual awakening, the one that gives you a boost on social networks. But today, you will discover a truth that can completely change how you see your journey. These silent phases that you are living and probably thinking a failure are actually the most important of all spiritual evolution. It is here, in this silence that feels like death, that the deepest inner transformation you can imagine takes place. While you think nothing is happening, your nervous system is being recalibrated, cellular traumas are being healed, false identities are being dissolved. But no one tells you that because there's nothing Instagrammable about it in a phase where you simply exist without fireworks. The problem is that we have been conditioned to think that awakening of the soul has to be always intense, always dramatic, always full of bombastic revelations. And when this quiet phase arrives, we freak out. But what if I told you that you're not lost? You've only entered the advanced level of the game. In this video, you will understand exactly what these silent phases of awakening are, why they happen, and most importantly, how to navigate them without collapsing or giving up on the path. You will discover specific signs that you are in a silent phase and not a regression. You will understand what to do and what not to do during this period, and you will learn to trust the process even when it seems that nothing is happening. If you have already lived or are living now this spiritual silence that no one explains, comment below on the number 11, because you are about to understand that this 11 of your journey, which seemed empty, is actually full of meaning. There's a moment in spiritual awakening that catches everyone off guard, you know? That's when the noise stops, the synchronicities disappear, and you stay there in silence, thinking that something has gone wrong. Most people panic at this time, thinking that they have lost connection or that they have regressed in the spiritual process. But here's a truth that few have the courage to speak up. This spiritual silence is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're entering the deepest layers of inner transformation. It's as if the awakened soul needed this recollection to do a job that doesn't fit in beautiful posts or inspiring phrases. While everyone celebrates the signs of awakening that are visible and exciting, almost no one mentions this quiet phase where true inner awakening happens away from the spotlight. The problem is that our modern spiritual culture has sold a romanticized version of the awakening of the soul, full of lights, ecstasies, and cinematic revelations at every turn. So when you get to that point where nothing seems to be happening, the mind goes off the red alert and whispers that you're doing something wrong. But think with me. A butterfly doesn't come out screaming from inside the cocoon, announcing its metamorphosis, right? It simply dissolves in the dark, becomes a soup of cells, and in this seemingly dead process, it is completely recreating itself. This silent awakening works just like that. You are being disassembled and reassembled into a whole new frequency, and it does not make any noise. The expansion of real consciousness does not come with fireworks. It comes with a silence so deep that it scares. And there's more. This phase is so important that it separates those who are really committed to spiritual evolution from those who are just touring in the world of mystical experiences. When the glamour ends and only you are left with yourself, without external confirmations, without extraordinary sensations, then you find out what you're really made of. Many people give up right here, thinking that the true awakening has passed and that now it is just decadence. But the reality is different. You have not regressed. You are just going through a portal that has no indicative sign. And on the other side of that silence, there is a version of spiritual consciousness that you don't even imagine yet. We have been conditioned to believe that spiritual awakening is like turning on a light in a dark room, quick, dramatic, and obvious for everyone to see. Social networks are full of reports of people living crazy synchronicities, receiving messages from the universe every 5 minutes, feeling mystical ecstasies while drinking coffee. And look, these experiences really happen. No one is saying they are false. The problem is that they have become the standard of what is expected of a true awakening, as if you are not really evolving unless your life feels like a spiritual fiction movie. But this is one of the biggest pitfalls of the spiritual process, because the deepest and most transformative phases of the journey are precisely the quietest, the most boring, the ones that no one will like on Instagram. That's where the real inner transformation lies. Think with me, when a tree grows, do you stand there watching it grow? Of course not, because real growth happens slowly, cell by cell, invisible to the eye. But if you come back after a year, where's the tree? Huge, strong, full of branches. The awakening of the soul works on the same logic. The most important changes happen in the layers that you can't even consciously perceive. While you think nothing is happening, your nervous system is being recalibrated, your deepest beliefs are being dissolved, your energetic frequency is being completely readjusted. But since this doesn't come with fireworks, the mind becomes impatient and concludes that you have stagnated. The reality is that you are in the most important phase of spiritual evolution, but it has nothing cinematographic. And there is another crucial detail that no one talks about. The noisy experiences of the beginning of awakening are often just an appetizer that the universe offers for you to be interested in the path. It's like that honeymoon period of any relationship, where everything is intense and magical. But after the honeymoon is over, comes the real relationship, the one that requires commitment, patience, and presence, even when there is no strong emotion going on. The silent awakening is exactly that. The phase where you learn to walk alone without depending on external confirmations or special sensations to know that you are on the right path. And curiously, it is in this almost depressive silence that the spiritual consciousness is truly anchored in you. After you experience that first boom of spiritual awakening, with all the synchronicities, deep insights, and the feeling of finally seeing reality for real, comes a phase that no one warns you will arrive: emptiness. It's like someone suddenly turned off the switch and you stood there in the dark, wondering what the hell happened. The meditations that used to take you to other dimensions now seem like just you sitting and breathing without any meaning. Those spiritual books that gave you goosebumps on every page became just words on a sheet of paper. Even talking about spirituality, which once energized you, now feels mechanical and empty. This is the spiritual hangover, my friend, and it is brutal precisely because you still have in your memory how amazing it was to be connected. What is really going on in this phase is that the ego, which had been knocked out with the initial awakening, is reorganizing itself behind the scenes. Think of it this way: you've spent years building an identity based on certain beliefs, standards, and ways of seeing the world. Here comes the inner awakening and detonates all of this in weeks or months. But those mental structures don't disappear overnight. They stay there, trying to recompose themselves, trying to make sense of what's left. It's like when you completely mess up a room to do a renovation. There is a moment in the middle of the process when everything is worse than before, with rubble everywhere and no functionality. You're not regressing. You're just in the middle of the necessary mess of inner transformation. The difference is that no one prepared you for this unglamorous part. And do you know what makes this phase even more confusing? You start to doubt if those experiences from the beginning were real or if you were just freaking out. The rational mind comes back with a vengeance, questioning every insight you had, every synchronicity that seemed so significant. It's as if the expansion of consciousness took one step back to be able to take 2 steps forward later, but you don't know it yet. Many people give up right here, go back to old habits, conclude that spirituality is not for them. But those who hold on, even feeling all this emptiness, even without understanding what is happening, discover that there was something silently gestating underneath all that feeling of nothingness. Here comes the most frustrating phase of all, because absolutely nothing extraordinary is happening on the surface, but deep down, in the layers that you can't even consciously access, a complete revolution is going on. It's like planting seeds in a garden and looking at the earth every day, hoping to see something sprout. You don't see anything, you get impatient, you think the seeds were bad or that you did something wrong. But underground, away from your anxious eyes, those seeds are cracking, taking root, preparing to emerge when they're ready. This invisible integration is exactly that, an underground work that spiritual consciousness is doing on you, reorganizing your internal structure into a completely new frequency. There's no way to speed it up. There's no way to force it. You can only trust that the spiritual process knows what it's doing. What is really happening in this phase is a recalibration of your entire nervous system. Think of it this way. You've spent your whole life operating at a certain frequency, with certain patterns of emotional response, certain automatic triggers, certain ways of processing reality. The awakening of the soul is not only a change of mental perspective, it is a physical change, cellular, neurological. Your body needs to adapt to be able to sustain this new consciousness without collapsing. It's like when you start working out hard after years of standing still. The muscles don't grow during training, they grow at rest, when you're sitting there thinking nothing is happening. Spiritual evolution works the same way. The biggest changes happen behind the scenes while you live your life thinking you're stagnant. And you know what's crazier? You may even notice some subtle changes in your behavior. Maybe you're less reactive in situations that once made you angry, or you realize that certain people and environments just don't make sense to you anymore. But these changes are so gradual, so natural, that you don't even register them as signs of true awakening. You only realize it when you look back months later and think, damn, I'm not that person anymore. This is the beauty of this silent phase. The inner transformation is happening in such an organic way that it doesn't even feel like effort. But precisely because there is no drama, there are no bombshell revelations, you think you are not moving forward, when in reality, you've never advanced so far. Now the phase that the ancient mystics called the dark night of the soul has arrived, but with a modern look that catches you totally off guard. That's when it seems that God, the universe, your spirit guides, everything just disappears from the map and leaves you alone in the desert. You try to meditate and you feel an absolute emptiness, as if you are talking to a wall. He asks for signs and receives nothing. Question if everything you've lived so far was nothing more than auto-suggestion, if you didn't invent this whole story of spiritual awakening to escape the dull reality of life. And the scariest thing, you start to question everything, your spiritual beliefs, your past experiences, even the meaning of continuing on that path. It feels like abandonment. It feels like punishment. It feels like you did something wrong, and now you're paying the price with this deafening silence. But here's the truth that no one tells you when you're in the middle of this storm. This is not a phase of abandonment. It's a phase of radical empowerment. Think with me. Until now, you've been leaning on spiritual crutches. A sign here, a synchronicity there, a sense of connection there. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone needs support in the beginning. But there comes a point when spiritual consciousness needs to anchor itself so deeply in you that it no longer depends on external confirmations. It's like learning to ride a bike. At first, you need the training wheels, but if you never take them off, you'll never really develop balance. This spiritual desert is when the universe takes off its wheels and says, now you will learn to support yourself. Does it hurt? It hurts like hell, but it is essential for true awakening. And there is another detail that makes all the difference. At this stage, you discover who you are when you take off all the spiritual masks. Because yes, we create spiritual masks too. The enlightened seeker, the evolved being, the one who receives messages from the universe. When all this is ripped from you and there is only you left naked in the desert, without any mystical props to cling to, then you find your real essence. Many people collapse here, run back to the comfort zone of old beliefs, or leave for another spiritual practice, thinking that they will find what they lost. But those who resist, those who stand firm even with God in silence, they cross over to the other side with an inner strength that no mystical experience can give. And without realizing it, you're preparing for something much bigger. After crossing the desert, you arrive at a stage that is unlike anything you have ever experienced before. Fertile silence. It is no longer that anguished emptiness of the beginning, nor that feeling of abandonment of the spiritual desert. It's a full silence, you know? A peace that does not need euphoria to validate itself. A presence that does not scream, but that is there, solid, unshakable. You simply exist without needing external confirmation, without having to prove to anyone, not even yourself, that you are on the right track. It is as if the awakened soul has finally found its home and no longer has to look for keys under every stone. That anxiety of, am I evolving? Am I connected? Am I doing it right? Disappears and gives way to a silent knowledge that needs no explanation. What happens here is that you have finally integrated the awakening of the soul into your daily life in such a natural way that it is no longer a special event and has simply become who you are. There is no longer that division between my spiritual self and my normal self. You wash the dishes with the same presence that you meditated on seeking enlightenment. You talk about trivial things with the same spiritual awareness that you previously only accessed in retreats. Think of it this way. In the beginning, you were like a tourist visiting spirituality. Everything was new, everything was intense. You took a mental picture of each experience. Now you are a local. You know every corner. You don't have to be impressed by anything anymore because everything is already part of you. This is the mark of true awakening. It ceases to be noisy precisely because it has become its nature. And do you know what's most beautiful about this phase? You stop trying to convince others of anything spiritual. Not because you became apathetic or disinterested, but because you understood that each person has their own timing, their own journey of expanding consciousness. You no longer feel the need for external validation, so you also don't need to validate your spiritual evolution through the recognition of others. If someone comes to you, you share it, but without that missionary weight of, I need to save people. You simply live your truth in silence, And that silence paradoxically speaks louder than 1,000 fiery speeches. That's when you realize all the noise at the beginning was necessary to call you to the journey, but the silence is where the journey really happens. The reason these phases of awakening are so quiet is simply because the real work happens at a level that the conscious mind cannot access or narrate. We are talking about neural reprogramming, healing from traumas that have been stored in your cells since childhood, or I don't know, from other lives if you believe that, dissolving false identities that you built to survive in a world that required masks. This type of inner transformation has nothing glamorous, it has nothing Instagrammable, it does not yield stories with a beautiful filter and inspiring music. It is raw, deep, underground work. It's like an internal surgery where you are both the patient and the surgeon, but without anesthesia and without an instruction manual. How are you going to post that on social media? Today, my ego died again, and I spent 3 hours staring at the ceiling, questioning my existence. It doesn't stick, right? Think of it like this. When you break a bone, the doctor puts on the cast and tells you to be quiet. Why? Because bone needs immobility and silence to regenerate properly. If you keep messing around, testing, wanting to see if you're already healed, you hinder the spiritual healing process. Inner awakening works exactly the same way. You have broken old structures, dissolved beliefs that have sustained you for decades, and now your being needs silence to reorganize itself into a new configuration. But we live in a culture addicted to constant stimuli, immediate results, external validation. Then when that necessary silence comes, the mind panics and wants to fill the void with something. More books, more courses, more practices, more experiences. When what you really need is absolutely nothing but permission to be silent. And there's another crucial point. The false identities you need to dissolve won't go screaming and kicking announcing your departure. They gradually dissolve, silently, like mist that evaporates with the morning sun. You don't realize the exact moment when that limiting belief ceased to have power over you, or when that pattern of self-sabotage finally died. You only realize months later when you look back and think, wow, I don't even remember when I stopped doing that. That's the beauty of the real frequency shift. It doesn't need an announcement because it is, by nature, silent. The noise is always from the ego wanting to prove something. Spiritual silence is of the soul that no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. How do you know if you are really in a silent phase of awakening or if you are just, I don't know, depressed and stagnant? First sign, you have zero desire to talk about spirituality, but at the same time you have not completely abandoned the path. It's like when you're in a serious relationship and you get past that phase of telling everyone how amazing your partner is. You just live the relationship without having to announce it. If you realize that you have stopped posting spiritual quotes, stopped entering those metaphysical discussion groups, stopped feeling the need to share your experiences, but still maintain your practices, even if mechanically, it is a sign that you have entered a phase of deep integration. Spiritual awareness is taking root so deep in you that it no longer needs the spotlight. Second, very specific sign. Your spiritual practices seem completely empty, but you continue to do them anyway. You meditate, and it seems that you are just sitting, breathing without any meaning. But something inside you insists on continuing. You do your rituals, your prayers, your visualizations, and you don't feel anything special at all. But you can't let go completely. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't feel ecstatic doing it, but you do it every day because you know it's important. When the awakening of the soul reaches this level of naturalness, where you maintain the practices without depending on immediate emotional rewards, you are at a level of spiritual maturity that 90% of people never reach. Third sign, you are much less emotionally reactive. Those things that used to make you mad now only cause you a slight temporary discomfort, if that. Fourth sign, you prefer solitude to socialization, but it's not a sad loneliness. It's a nourishing, restorative solitude. You realize that you need a lot of alone time to process everything that's going on internally, and social interactions start to drain your energy faster than before. Not because you've become antisocial, but because your frequency has changed and you're still adjusting to it. And the last sign, perhaps the most important, you have constant doubts about everything, about God, about the way, about your past experiences, but deep down, you have a peace that is unshaken by those doubts. It's like having a storm on the surface of the ocean, while in the depths, everything is calm. If you identify with 3 or more of these signs of awakening, you can relax. You have not regressed. You are precisely in the most important phases of spiritual evolution. The first thing you need to understand about what to do in these silent phases is precisely this. Don't do anything forced. Seriously, stop trying to provoke spiritual experiences. Stop testing new techniques, hoping that one of them will give you back that feeling of intense connection from the beginning. You're not in a creative drought that needs crazy brainstorming to solve. You're in a deep gestation that needs patience and respect for the natural timing of things. It's like when you plant a seed and dig the earth every day to see if it's sprouted. You're going to kill the seed from moving so much. True awakening at this stage asks for the exact opposite of what the anxious mind wants to do. He asks you to simply allow the sacred boredom, that guiltless boredom, without the need to fill every second with some productive or spiritually relevant activity. Now, this does not mean dropping everything and becoming a vegetable on the couch, waiting for the lighting to fall from the sky. It means keeping routines simple, almost silly because they are so basic, but doing them with presence. Walking with no headphones, no podcast, no music, just you, your feet and the ground. Breathe consciously for 5 minutes when you wake up, with no expectation of having any cosmic revelation, just breathing because breathing is good. Cooking, paying attention to every movement, every smell, every texture. Look at the sky from time to time and simply watch the clouds passing by. Does it sound like old retired talk? It seems. But it is exactly in these mundane actions that inner transformation is truly anchored. Because you are bringing spiritual consciousness to the earthly plane, you are teaching your nervous system that presence does not need a mystical scenario to happen. And there is one crucial thing you need to do at this stage: drastically reduce your spiritual consumption. Stop reading 10 books about awakening at the same time. Stop watching videos after videos, looking for someone to tell you that everything is fine. Stop taking course after course, thinking that you will find the missing piece of the puzzle. You already have too much information. What you don't have is integration. It's like filling your belly with food and not giving your body time to digest it before eating again. You need informational fasting so that everything you have already absorbed has a chance to be processed and incorporated. Trust in nothing is happening. Trust that this absence of fireworks is not a failure of the system, it is the system working in the deepest mode. And when you least expect it, you will look back and realize that in all this silence, you have become someone else. So we get to that point where everything that has been said here needs to be felt more than understood, you know? Because the great truth about spiritual awakening is that silence is not the absence of God. It is presence without noise, without fanfare, without the need for proclamation. When you were a kid and your parents were around, you didn't have to be yelling, "Where are you?" every 5 minutes to know they were there, right? You just knew. You felt their presence even when they were in another room. The awakening of the mature soul works exactly like this. You stop needing constant signals because the connection has become something so natural, so integrated, that it has ceased to be an event and has become a state of being. Spiritual silence is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of the real journey, the one where you no longer need a map because you are the map. So if you are at this moment in your spiritual evolution where it seems that nothing is happening, where the practices seem empty and life seems too ordinary, take a deep breath and understand, you have not lost the way. You have only entered the part of the path that does not have luminous plates. And this is precisely the most important part, because this is where you learn to trust what you don't see, to believe what you don't feel, to keep walking even without knowing exactly where you're going. The real frequency shift doesn't come with trumpets and drums. It comes in a whisper so low that only those who are in deep silence can hear it. And you, my friend, are learning the hardest art of all, the art of trusting in the invisible. Trust what you don't feel. Trust in the silence that seems empty but is pregnant with possibilities. Trust that while you think nothing is happening, everything is rearranging itself in the deepest layers of your spiritual consciousness. And most importantly, trust that this spiritual process knows exactly what it's doing, even when you have no idea. True awakening does not need your understanding to happen. It just needs your permission to continue. And if you've made it this far, you've already given that permission. So after everything you've absorbed here, the question that remains is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you continue to panic every time silence comes, or will you finally understand that silence is an essential part of your true awakening? Because look, you can have all the information in the world about the phases of spiritual awakening. But if you don't apply it in practice, if you don't allow these silent phases to do their work in you, nothing really changes. So I challenge you, the next time you feel that emptiness, that absence of signs, that feeling that God has disappeared, instead of running after more books, more courses, more external confirmations, you will simply stop, breathe, and trust. Can you do it? And he answers me sincerely, how many times have you given up on something important in your life just when you were closer to real transformation? How many times have you interpreted silence as rejection when it was actually preparation? Are you willing to change that now? Because spiritual evolution doesn't happen in moments of ecstasy. It happens just when you choose to go on, even without feeling anything, even without being sure, even without applause. This is the difference between those who stay tourist in spirituality and those who really awaken, the courage to honor silence. So I ask you again, will you honor your silent phases, or will you continue to fight against them? If this video made sense to you, if you finally understood that you are not lost, but on the right track, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Because here, we don't just talk about the beautiful part of awakening, we dive into the phases that no one has the courage to discuss, behind the scenes of inner transformation, in the real and raw side of spiritual consciousness. And if you want to keep really evolving, you need this kind of content that goes beyond the superficial. See you in the next video, and remember, silence is not the absence of God. It is presence without noise. Trust what you don't feel.